Hello, everyone. So welcome to ESCP Business School information session today. My name is Nathalie Quintin-Gueselius. I'm in charge of international promotion for the Master in Management. Feel free today, of course, to send in your questions in the chat function. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end of the session, so feel free to send in your question as we're talking. Today it's a bit of a special session because we're very happy to have Maria Kirillova with us. So she's representing ETS, which is offering the GRE general test, and she will give you also an overview of the test so you can understand more about the structure of the test and decide also, of course, which test you want to take. And also, we're very lucky to have Akshata Jaiwant, who is a MIM student. She's currently in London finishing her semester, and she also took the GRE. So it will be great to have her perspective because she was in your shoes a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, and feel free also to make the most of the session and ask your questions directly to Akshata and Maria. So I will start with a section on the admission guidelines, and I will let Maria speak after about the test. So who is eligible for the MIM program? There are three main requirements. So you need to have a bachelor or a master's degree in any field of study. We expect English fluency, so level of B2 is recommended. And of course, internationally minded students with a proven academic excellence. So what is considered a plus in an application? The work experience. So if you already have an internship or two on your resume, it's always a great advantage. Any additional languages that you may speak, it's also always highly valued by the jury. And any previous international experience is also a plus. Of course, we're looking at all the different components of your application. So don't be afraid if you don't have already substantial international exposure, or if you don't speak 3 or 4 different languages. The idea is that you're interested in those elements, and the school will be here, of course, to provide that experience for you as well. I just wanted to clarify also the application path and which path is adapted to which type of candidate. So roughly you have 2 possibilities. Either you did your bachelor degree in France, you gain a French degree. In that case, we have concours d'admission direct, and there is only 1 session per year, usually a deadline beginning of March. And we have the other alternative. If you did your bachelor degree in any country other than France, you have 2 admission paths that are possible. So the first one, international direct admission, you apply directly to ESCP. And we have 4 sessions per year. And I included the link to the application form, so you can find it on the website. And we have the application process, join a school in France, which used to be called SAI, which stands for Service des Admissions Internationales. And basically, it's a common application process for 5 business schools located in France, including ESCP Business School and also HEC Paris, EM Lyon, Audencia Nantes, and Schema. So you can choose one or the other. For us as an institution, it doesn't make any difference. We highly value applications received from both application paths. It's really about finding which process is more adapted to your profile and to your personal project as well. If you're interested in more than one school and more than one school in the consortium, it can be a good thing to apply through Join a School in France. And if you're primarily interested in ESCP, in that case, you can apply it directly. But you will be evaluated in any case at the same time. The admission rounds are happening pretty much at the same time. It's the same admission calendar, so you're evaluated all at the same time. Some guidelines. So for concours d'admission direct, just I don't know, but there might be some of you today that that have taken a degree in France. You have to make sure that the program, your licence or bachelor degree, is recognized by the French Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation. It's very important. And I added as a tip a website where you can check that. Usually the school can tell you, of course, but if you want to verify beforehand, you can check on that cfcg.fr website, and you have the list of all the schools and all the programs that are recognized. For international direct admission and Join a School in France, you need to have a bachelor's degree awarded outside of France after at least 3 years of university studies and a maximum of 1 year spent in France. So I mentioned special cases with dual degrees because I know a lot of students nowadays have degrees from multiple institutions, and sometimes you spend a couple of years in one country, maybe a couple of years in another country. Let's say, for example, a bachelor where you do maybe 1 year in France, 2 years in Germany, and at the end you get a French and a German degree. Sometimes, depending on the degree that you get, and depending on how much time you spend in each country, you could be eligible to multiple admission paths, or only one, or sometimes none. So it's really important that you check with us beforehand which admission path is adapted to your profile, and before you submit an application, make sure you verify the eligibility with us. For international direct admission, we organize admissions on a rolling basis, and we have several rounds. Just to make it clear, the choice of application deadline and admission round is dictated by the country of residence at the time you apply. So it doesn't determine where you will study. It's only the country where you live will determine which campus will look after your application and your interview. But for example, if you're in Germany, it's our Berlin campus that will be managing your application, but you may very well start your studies in Paris or London or any other ESCP campus. You can find a drop-down menu on the website with all the countries on Earth that are listed, and you can check also, depending on where you are, which campus will be looking after your application. You may submit only one application in the same year. And of course, you submit your application either in the last year of your bachelor or pre-graduation, or you can also apply the year after. I know some students like to take a gap between their bachelor and their master's degree, for example, so it's possible to apply also if you've already finished your bachelor degree. You can only apply and submit one application per year, so you have to choose the application path and stick to that application path because we will only accept one application in the same year. And of course, the application is the first screening. Then students who are shortlisted for the interview, you will have the second step to the application process, which will be the motivation interview. So I will give more details afterwards about what to expect with the interview. And the list of documents that you need, that's for the international admission processes. You have the university transcript, then you have the degree, certificate, or diploma if it's available, if you already got it. Then we have two references, either academic or professional. I do get the question a lot, do I need to have both? It depends on your profile. If you've done internships, maybe a 6-month internship, which is quite long, then it makes sense to have a professional reference. So it's always interesting for us to have that perspective. A statement of purpose or motivation letter can be added also. It's always good to have. English proficiency test, we need a TOEFL, TOEIC, IELTS, or Cambridge. We accept, of course, the online version of those tests. So if you prefer to take the test from home, it's possible. And we ask for a logic aptitude test. So we accept GMAT, GRE, CAT for Indian students, and French Math for French students. So just one tip that I can give you, we don't have cutoff scores. So our objective is really for you to aim for the highest, but just know that we don't have a cutoff score. So now I will let Maria present the GRE. So let me make her a presenter so she can share her presentation with you. So Maria, you're a presenter now. You should be able to share your slides with us.
Perfect. Let me just share the presentation first of all. Okay, can you all see it? Yes, excellent. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me on this webinar. It's wonderful to be here and to speak to all of you. As Natalie mentioned already, I will be talking to you about the GRE General Test. And just walk you through the structure, how to register, what preparation materials are available, and so on. So let's get started. First, we start with the overview of how you can use the GRE General Test. It's a test that is used around the world for master programs, specialized masters in business, such as the MIM program at ESCP, MBA programs, etc. And the scores are valid for 5 years. So if your study plans change over the next few months, or if you're still in the early stages of deciding where to go to school, which program to select, you should know that your GRE scores are still valid for the next 5 years. Then, because we are talking about master programs in management and MBA programs, I just wanted to tell you that at the moment, more than 1,300 business schools accept GRE scores for their management programs in general. And here at the bottom of this slide, there is actually a quote from Harvard Business School that I wanted to share with you. And this is just to show that business schools around the world accept the GMAT and the GRE in parity. As the quote says here, there is no minimum GMAT or GRE score to apply, and we do not have any bias towards one test or the other. As Natalie mentioned in the previous slide when she was talking about the requirements, both the GMAT and the GRE are accepted from the school. So you can just check which test is better for you and then select to sit for this one. Now, I wanted just to show you quickly what the GRE General Test consists of. And again, this is a very brief overview. If you have some questions, please drop them in the chat box, and I hope we have the time to answer them at the end. But these are the three components of the GRE General Test: the analytical writing, the verbal reasoning, and the quantitative reasoning. The analytical writing has one section and 2 tasks in total, 30 minutes per task. The verbal reasoning and the quantitative reasoning have 2 sections each, 20 questions per section, and 30 minutes per section for the verbal reasoning and 35 minutes per section for the quantitative reasoning. Now, because this is a lot of information, let me just break it down very, again, briefly and on a basic level for you. So this is the first section, which is the analytical writing section. There are 2 tasks, as I mentioned earlier. The first task, as the title suggests, is to analyze an issue, where you will be required to do so, and also to develop an argument with reasons and/or examples to support your position. The second task is to analyze an argument, which requires you to assess the logical soundness of a given argument according to the specific task directions. On this section, the answers are typed on a computer, so you know all these functionalities that you're used to, inserting text, copy pasting, etc., are available for you as well. This is the second section of the test. This is the verbal reasoning. And this section assesses your ability to understand what you read and how you apply your reasoning skills. The question types will include reading comprehension, text completion, and sentence equivalence. Some of them are multiple choice, some of them are selecting passage. Actually, at the end of this presentation, I have a couple of sample GRE test questions to just show you, just so you can get an understanding of what the test looks like and feels like. And one of them, I believe, is the selecting passage type of question. So we'll have a look at that in a little while. And I'm coming to the final component. That's the quantitative reasoning section. It assesses your ability to interpret and analyze quantitative information and solve problems using mathematical models. The question types will include quantitative comparison. Again, there is multiple choice, there is numeric entry, and the skills that are included in this section are coming from arithmetics, algebra, geometry, and data analysis. I believe it's important here to point out on the right-hand side the on-screen calculator. It's available for you throughout the quantitative reasoning section, so please make use of it as you need to, as the questions require you to do so. And this is just a little bit of how the test looks like. So this is a sample question from the GRE, and you see the calculator in action. You also see at the top of the screen the navigation panel, and I just wanted to really show you here and underline that the GRE has a very test taker friendly design. So you as a test taker can go back and forth into the section, you can mark questions. Some other tests require you to answer each and every question before you can move on, but the GRE actually gives you a lot more flexibility and freedom, and allows you to deploy your own test taking strategies. For example, if you find a question too difficult and you want to come back to it a little bit later or in a couple of minutes, you can do so. That's absolutely not a problem. So this is what these functionalities actually look like. Now moving on, I wanted to really underline something that is specific to the GRE test. There's the section level adaptive structure. And as I mentioned earlier, the verbal reasoning and the quantitative reasoning have 2 sections each. And they are section level adaptive. What this means is that the computer selects the second section of a measure based on your performance on the first section. Within each section, all questions contribute equally to your final score. Both sections are important since the final score on each measure is based on the total number of correct answers and the level of difficulty of the questions. So just so you know, depending on how you do on the first section, the second one will be adapted. The level of difficulty will be adapted. And here is a myth buster for you. Points are not deducted for wrong answers. So it's always better to guess than to leave an answer blank. So even if you're not sure, it's always better to select an answer. And here is a little bit about our test centers network. We currently have more than 1,000 test centers in 160 countries. And the link at the bottom of this page shows you how to find them. You can just search bar your location and the proximity of a test center. However, due to the health crisis and the global pandemic this year, we introduced the GRE at home, which is available everywhere except for mainland China and Iran. And what this means is that you can actually take the same GRE test from the comfort of your home. The good news for you as a test taker is that it's identical in content, in format, etc. So if you have been already preparing for the GRE general test and you were planning to take it at a test center, you should have no problems to take the same test, but then at home. For the universities where you're applying to or the programs, there is also no difference because the scores are the same, so they don't need to adjust anything in their admission requirements. And because you're taking the test from home, it's monitored through a live human proctor, so they will be watching through your camera. And I know that may sound very scary, but actually, it's there more to support you. For example, if there is a technical issue or a technical glitch, they can help you work through it so you can continue with your test. And the next slide, I just have very briefly the computer requirements of what you need in order to take the GRE at home. It needs to be a desktop or a laptop. You can't take it from your mobile, and it needs to be a Windows operating system or a Mac operating system with the Chrome or a Firefox browser. For the microphone and the camera requirements, it can be both a built-in or an external. That doesn't matter as long as the quality is good, that's absolutely fine. So this is just in a nutshell the requirements for your setup at home. Now I wanted to give you some registration tips, and the first one really is register as early as you can, because in this way you're going to make sure that you have your preferred testing location, date and time. The date and time are valid both for the at-home and the test center version of the test. You can start preparing, so once you know when your test date is, you can start working your way through the preparation. And in order to register, you need to create an ETS account. Here is the link for you to do so. This ETS account is actually very important because it's going to be with you throughout your GRE journey. So this is where you register, this is where you receive your scores, this is where you access preparation materials, etc. So make note of this, keep your login details at hand. And this is what the ETS account looks like. You see when you click on the blue button, you can find both the test center version of the test and the at-home version. So when you click register, you can just select whichever works for you better. Now, I'm quickly going to give you some tips and strategies because we do want you to be prepared. We want you to do the best that you can on your test day. We already know that it's quite an anxious experience for some of you. And the first tip really is to become familiar with the question formats and directions. What that means is that during your test, when you kind of glance at the question, you already know what to expect from it, how many answers there are that are correct and you need to pick, etc. Of course, be aware of time. There is a timer on the test, but if that's making you too nervous, you can also hide it and then just make sure you're keeping track of the time. Make sure you understand what each question is asking you. So don't assume, this is what the question is asking, so this must be the correct answer. Read it all the way until the end. Again, I already mentioned that earlier, but answer every question, even if you have to make your best guess, because there is no penalty for wrong answers. And also, don't waste time on questions that you find too difficult, because no question carries a greater weight than any other question. Tools to help you prepare. This is actually something that I really wanted to underline to you. I already mentioned the ETS account. Each and every one of you can go to the link that is down here on the page, and you can already create your ETS account. That doesn't mean that you're committed to taking the GRE test, but what that allows you to do is to access all the preparation materials. And as you go through the preparation materials, you can check, is the GRE the right test for me, or maybe not. And the first preparation tool that we have is called Power Prep, and it's a booklet that contains information to help familiarize you to the question types, test taking features, tools, etc. Again, it's available in your ETS account. And the second tool, sorry, I went too fast. This is the second tool. It's pretty much, it's called Power Prep, and it allows you to take 2 GRE tests. They are the real GRE tests for free. One of them is even timed, so you have you're completely recreating the test taking environment. And it's a good way. It's always good to do it now, just so you can see how the GRE fits with you, and also you can pinpoint how you're doing. You can self-diagnose. You can see maybe on one section of the test you're doing really well, and on another section you need to work a little bit more. So it's a good way to get started with your preparation. And this was actually the end of my presentation on the GRE. Now I wanted to just, as a last thing, to share with you a few sample questions. And this is from the verbal reasoning. This is the text completion, as I mentioned earlier. It's a very long, it's a very long question, but I'm just going to read it out for you. In the meantime, try and pinpoint the right answer. So here we go. It is refreshing to read a book about our planet by an author who does not allow facts to be overshadowed, invalidated, illuminated by politics. Well aware of the political disputes about the effects of human activities on climate and biodiversity, this author does not permit them to enhance, obscure, underscore his comprehensive description of what we know about our biosphere. He emphasizes the enormous gaps in our knowledge, the sparseness of our observations, and the plausibility of our hypotheses, certainty of our entitlements, superficiality of our theories, calling attention to the many aspects of planetary evolution that must be better understood before we can accurately diagnose the condition of our planet. So this is the question. I hope you were able to maybe pinpoint an answer or two that you thought were right, and here they are. Here are the correct answer. So questions like this you can see with the Power Prep online. And this is the last one that I have for you actually today. It's from the quantitative reasoning. I know a lot of you are nervous about the quantitative reasoning, but there's nothing to worry about if you prepare in advance. And this is one of the questions: which of the following integers are multiples of both 2 and 3? And notice here you must indicate all such integers. So there's no one right answer, there's multiple, and here they are. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention so far. And if you have some questions, please drop them in the box. I am now going to pass it again to Natalie. So let me just do that.
Restarting from the beginning, sorry, I'll just go through. Someone mentioned that the sound was really, really bad. Is it still the case when I have the headphones? Otherwise, I will remove the headphones because I think the microphone is not working very well. Can you tell me if you can hear me?
I think now it's much
It's
better.
better.
Yes.
So it was yeah, the cord is very long, so I think it was dragging a little too low. Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know. So yes, so the next section. Thank you so much, Maria. The next section will be some tips on the interview, because I know a lot of you are wondering what to expect from the interview, and it's also another component of the application that students might be stressing a little bit about. So I will just give you some indications about what we expect at ESCP, and also some general tips that hopefully you can use in your strategy when applying to different programs, as we expect that you will be probably applying in different schools. So of course, the first one, do your research and prepare for the interview. I think it is quite obvious. Each school is different, each program has different expectations. So it's really important that you make sure to prepare well for the program and for the school specifically. So you can ask, of course, the admission staff and the recruitment staff, what type of interview do we expect? So for example, for the Master in Management, usually we have a face-to-face interview, but lately it's been mostly on Skype. It's a 20-25 minutes interview, and it's mostly the style, I would say. It's not a stress interview. The idea is not to put you under pressure. It's more about getting to know you better and understanding more about your motivation and your personality. So it's more of a conversation. And what we're looking at is understanding also what we've been seeing in your application, and delve a little deeper into your background and your career goals and your expectations of the program. Of course, you can always reach out to alumni groups and student ambassadors to ask about their tips. So maybe it's actually a good moment to ask Akshata, because you applied last year. Can you tell us about how your interview went? How did you apply to the school? Which admission path did you take? And also your experience of the GRE.
Yes, thank you so much, Natalie. So I actually applied, I started my school last year. So I applied in 2019, beginning of the year. I applied through Joint School France, so I basically applied to 5 schools with one application. I gave the GRE, I gave the IELTS exam, and I knew that I have the requirements to apply. And then I got, after sending in all the documents and writing the motivation, answering the motivation questions for SAI, I got selected for an interview. So I'm from India. So sorry, I did not introduce myself. My name is Akshata. I'm currently in Master 2 year. I'm currently in London. I just finished my consulting specialization. How it went was, I was called for an interview in Mumbai. Since I'm in India, it was a face-to-face interview in India. As Natalie said, the interview was very informal, not at all stressful. They wanted to know more about my background, so they had my CV. They asked me questions regarding how my previous professional experience was, my previous education, some specific questions, and then it was, for me, it lasted for around 40 minutes, but it was very informal and not stressful at all. They just wanted to know what was my motivation to study in France, because it was joint school France, and then which school that I like. My preference was, of course, ESCP. So then they asked me what do I like more about ESCP, and so like Natalie said earlier, I had done my research. I knew what the school has differently, which sets them apart from other schools. So they asked me questions about that, why I really want to go to ESCP. And it was just a 40 minutes conversation rather than an interview, which gave them a clear perspective about why I wanted to do a master in management program.
Thank you so much, Akshata. So yes, it's very important to know beforehand when you apply. Don't hesitate to ask what to expect from the interview. Of course, you can also ask who will be in the interview panel. In some cases, it's an indication also of the style of the interview. If you have two professors or if you have two alumni, it might be a different atmosphere and also different angle to the questions that are being asked. So usually we try to have, of course, it's not a blind interview. The interviewers have read your application package, so they have more than your CV. They really have the whole application, and they will ask specific questions for you. So of course you can ask beforehand, who will be meeting you on the interview day, so that you can also prepare a bit more specific aspects of your application. And then of course there is a blog. I didn't mention it, but we have students that are contributing to MIM blog articles, and one of them is 6 tips for a successful interview from one of our students. And also feel free to reach out to the student ambassadors. They can also give you some advices on the application and the interview. Know your application. So again, it might seem a bit obvious, but usually it's the only elements we have on your background. It's your application. We don't know you yet. So we use the application as a basis for the interview, and to give some substance also to the conversation. So make sure that you review your essays and your CV that you submitted for each particular school, because most likely each school will have some particularities that might be of interest to you. And for example, at ESCP Business School, as you may understand, the programs and the school are very, very international. There is a very strong international identity. So you might want to, for example, stress in your application the international exposure that you may have gained from work experience or from your studies, for example. Also, you have to be ready to go into greater depth than in your essays. So the essays are quite short, as you may see in the application. I don't know if you already looked into it, but usually we expect you to answer with maybe 10, 15 lines. And sometimes it's not long enough to really detail all the aspects and all the ideas that you want to convey. So you have to be ready to give some concrete examples and to really know your application well. Also, it's important that you know what the school is looking for. At ESCP, of course, we'll be looking at mainly the potential for further development. So most likely the interviewers will ask themselves the question, do we want you to be part of the ESCP community? Will you be a good ambassador for the school? Will you have a successful career? How well would you do in a job interview? So they will ask themselves those questions. So you have also to really answer and show that you have a strong potential. And then we're looking at the experience and the exposure. Sometimes it can be also a way of, again, because the school is being so international, we'll need to make sure that the level of English is very high. So we might also check that again during the interview. Also know how to approach challenging questions. So it's important to know, even though the style of the interview won't be a stress interview and the idea is not to put you under scrutiny, we still want to know how you can think on your feet. And if you get a tough question, how do you react? It can tell a lot about behavior and expected behavior in the classroom. So probably prepare an example of maybe a difficulty that you've been faced with and how did you cope with it and what did you learn from it. Weaknesses or inadequacies, I think it's a very similar topic, but a bit more personal about your personality. Some uncommon questions, it can be what is a good leader for you, or what is the most overrated leadership skill, and you will need to answer the question quickly. So again, it's a way of seeing how you can think on your feet, and also if someone is a little too rehearsed, it's a way of shaking things off a little. And we want to again add some substance to the conversation and to the discussion. And yeah, we want to see how you react. So some questions also that are maybe not the most challenging, but sometimes I know students feel like they can't really answer the question. We might ask about the other schools that you will be applying for. It's a way for us to understand your project. And for example, depending on the schools that you're applying for, we may understand that you really have a strong desire to study in France, for example, or in Europe. In some cases, we'll see that students are applying a little bit everywhere in the world. So maybe the project of studying in Europe is one among many others. So we want to understand where you stand and what is really your project. And also make sure you're up to date with business news. You will probably be asked, about commenting on the news, something that struck you as being quite important in the news lately. It can be business, economics, society, politics, anything that shows that you're interested in what's going on in the world and that you're interested in different topics. To be your authentic self, of course, if you're invited for the interview, it means that you, if I can say, you passed the academic bar. So the idea is not to understand if you're competent or not. Most likely, we know by then that you are competent for the program, but we want to get to know you. So the interview will serve as a bit of a vetting process, a review of your background. So we make sure that you are really the person you say you are on the paper. And also you have to be ready to give some personalized examples. So what makes ESCP your first choice? Maybe there are some specific classes, specializations that you haven't found anywhere else. It could be the campus locations that you want to study in different countries. could be a specific topic or a professor that you are really interested in their research, for example. And also the interviewers and the school will try to make sure that you're a good fit for the institution. So at ESP, of course, we'll look at your personality, and we want to make sure you're a good fit for the school and for the wider alumni network. And stay grounded. So we really want to know about you. You don't need to make up hobbies that you don't have, or we don't expect you to be an athlete and a top athlete and everything. And we want very good students, but we understand that you may have different interests and different level of involvement in different activities. You don't have to come up with things that are not really your passion. Another point will be to prepare some questions. I think it's always very good to be an active participant in the discussion. So we don't want to just be the ones asking the questions. It shows interest when, and it conveys interest and thoroughness in your preparation when you do have questions for the committee. So try to find in advance some meaningful, targeted questions that you can ask to the committee, and don't keep the questions that are really based on admission questions or general questions on the program that the admissions team or myself can answer with you. We can have one-to-one talks before you apply to the program, and try to find maybe more specific questions for the committee. And if you do know in advance who will be interviewing you, it will be great to look them up online, on LinkedIn, on the website. We have a faculty search function on the web page, for example, so you can really look at who will be interviewing you and what their profile is. And one last tip, of course, about the dress code. We do get a lot of questions about how should I dress. Dress in business formal. I would say dress as you would for a job interview. Even if it's an online Skype interview, it doesn't show a good first impression if you really underdress. So try to dress the part. You're applying to a top tier business school. Formal suit for men, and same rule apply, I would say, to women. And a tip is it's always better to overdress than to underdress. So make sure that you really dress the part, and regardless of if it's on campus or if it's a remote online interview, it's the same professional dress rules that will apply. So I try to keep it short. I just have some key figures on the school. You have the accreditation, so AACSB, EQUIS, which is the European accreditation, and the new EFMD accreditation for the MBA and Executive MBA. The Master in Management ranked number 6 worldwide in the Financial Times. And you have a complete portfolio, as you may know, ranging from the bachelor to the global executive PhD. At any given time, we have approximately 7,000 students in degree programs coming from 120 different countries. So it's a very international school again, and it's also very much a representation of our classes. And a network of 65,000 alumni in over 150 countries. And in my last slide, I gave all of our contact details. So if you're interested in keeping in touch with us, if you have some questions that maybe you didn't think of during the session here today, you can always email us with your specific questions. And I will look, because we have a number of questions already in the chat. So I think Maria, Akshata, and myself will try to cover all those questions today. Let me just sort them out. I will open the grid. Hello. Let's see. I have some general questions on the program itself, so I think I will answer those. Sorry, last. Someone is asking, so it's a question more for Maria. Someone is asking very specifically, where can I take the GRE in Venezuela?
That's a great question. Let me find out the exact link. It was included in the presentation. If you create your ETS account, you can find all the test centers. But maybe, Natalie, maybe I can put this in the chat box for everybody to kind of try and find their test centers. Let me just grab the link.
Absolutely, you can send in the chat to the whole attendees.
Yes, that would be great. The link it's not complicated, is ets.org/GRE/test centers. But let me just put it right there, so maybe some other of the attendees also have the same question.
Or maybe there is a question I can answer quickly in the meantime. There is a student asking when is the right time to apply for the MIM 2021 intake. Akshata, maybe you can tell us when did you apply, which session did you choose, and what was your strategy when applying?
So that's a great question. I applied in round two because for me personally, I first had to give my GRE and my English test. So for me, the correct time was round two, but I think you can, I think we have 3 rounds for joint school France. So I think 4 rounds, sorry, 4 rounds. So you can apply till, I think my round was clear. I got the results in February for round two. So I think after that there are 2 rounds. So I think you still have time like to apply for the 21 intake.
Thank you, Akshata. I think if I can complement what you just said, there is no best session to apply to. There's no right or wrong. We offer 4 sessions and we have students admitted in those 4 sessions. So it's more about what is the right time for you and when is your application and your test scores the best representation of your level. So if you do sessions, on the GRE or any other test, and on trial sessions you get a certain score, and then on the day off you get much lower score than what you usually get, chances are maybe you were a bit stressed, maybe some questions were a bit put you a bit off balance, but it's not a representation of your real score and what you can do and your potential. So our advice is push your application off for maybe the next round, and then make sure that you take the time to prepare well for the test and make sure that you really get the best score that you can get. So an excellent candidate is an excellent candidate, and you should be admitted, whether it's the fall admission round, which is the first one, or if it's the summer application round. Maybe the only thing I can say is if you wait for the very last admission round at ESCP, because we have limited places on the different campuses, you may not get your first choice. And of course, we understand the location is very important. But if you're very specifically wanting to start, let's say, for example, in London, maybe in that case, because it's a bit smaller campus than the Paris campus, then it's better not to wait for the last session. So our advice is really try to have optimal scores and an optimal representation of your level. Someone is actually asking, can we connect with MIM students? Of course. I gave the general address actually of the student ambassadors. So depending on your the nature of your question and your profile, different students are involved in the management of the questions coming into that inbox. And so someone with quite likely some similarities with your background or some common points that you can relate to will answer your questions. So yes, you can, of course, you can email the student ambassadors, and you have the address that's right here on the slide. There is a question actually for Maria and Nakshata. I think both of you can answer. Someone is asking, is the GMAT as good as the GRE for the MIM program? I will answer after you answer.
Shall I make a start, or would you like to be first, Akshata?
No, go ahead.
So the GMAT and the GRE are two very different exams, even though they're both accepted at business schools. So from your perspective as an applicant, I think you need to go and have a little look at both of them and see which one fits you better, because there are some differences that can really make an impact on your test day. For example, the GRE is section level adaptive, so you can go back and forth, etc. The GMAT doesn't have this functionality. So both of the tests actually have practice options online. My very best advice, my very honest advice to you would be, go ahead and have a practice test at both and see which one is better for you personally. Just before I give the floor to Akshita, I wanted to mention, Natalie, I pasted the link to the test centers, but I couldn't share it with everybody. Maybe if you could just share it with all the attendees, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so for me, I totally agree with Maria. I did the same thing. I gave the test, like the sample test that was there on the GMAT website and the ETS website, and it all comes down to playing to your strengths. For me, a question adaptive exam, for me, I thought it was stressful for me, but it depends from person to person. That's why I went ahead with GRE, which gives you a flexibility to switch questions within section, and you can time yourself accordingly. So it totally depends. If you are comfortable with question adaptive, you can go for GMAT, but GRE just gives you the flexibility.
Thank you. And maybe my answer from the school, we don't have a preference. I always say that, and it is very true. We don't have a preference. You have to find a test that's a good fit for you. And again, we'll interpret the different results depending on the test that you chose. But we won't value more one test over the other, and we won't consider an application more competitive because there is one test or the other. So it's really about which test is a good fit for you, but for us it won't make a difference. Let me see. Someone is asking if there is a minimum score requirement. So we mentioned it a bit earlier. We don't have cutoff scores. So no, we won't have a minimum score. Let's see, this is more of the program question. Someone is asking if the session will be available. Yes, it's being recorded as we're speaking, and you get a replay, so you can access the presentation whenever you want. You will have a recording of the session. We have a question. This time it's on the English test. I have a question. Do we have to get the English certificate, IELTS, for example, before we apply to the program? Well, yes, you do. In order for us to consider an application, we need to have the complete application with all the test scores. So our advice, again, if you don't have the score within the deadline, it's better to roll over your application to the next round when your application is really complete. And then we have a question. Yeah, it's a bit for both of you again. What could be considered a good GRE score for the program? So again, we don't have a cutoff. Maybe you can tell us, Akshata, when you took the test, what was your objective? Like, did you have a score in mind that you wanted to reach?
Yeah, so while I was practicing for my test, I knew that I was falling in the range of 315, 320, somewhere around that. And on the final day, I scored in the same range. So I knew that that was the score that I was aiming for, and that's what I got. But I don't know if there's like a good score. It totally depends on the percentile that you get. I got a 315 in GRE, but it again, because there's not a cutoff or a minimum score or an expected score by schools, so it is just analyzing how much you expected while preparing, how much you got on your test, like test preps, and are you matching that score, or are you in that range when you give the final exam?
Thank you, Akshata. And I can add also that we work on a multi-criteria selection of candidates. So we're looking at the test score. We're looking at your English proficiency test score. We're looking at your profile, meaning your academic records, if you have some work experience, some international experience, and then you have the interview. And all those components have different weight and different percentage. And we're very transparent about how much each one is, because you have in the guidelines on the website the percentage that corresponds with each component. The management test amounts to 10% of the overall evaluation. So it means that even if you have maybe a test score that's average, but you have a very interesting profile because you've done internships, you have maybe lived abroad already, you have excellent academic records. In that case, that can also balance out a score that would be a bit on the average side. So keep in mind that it's only one component. Don't put 100% of your energy. I don't know if I should be saying that, Maria, but don't put all of it in just the management test and stress about that, because I think everything else is also taken into consideration when selecting students. And we're looking at well-rounded candidates. So some students I know are very performant on the tests, but that's the only great component that they end up having, because they focus only on getting I don't know, as close to 340 as possible, and then they just neglect everything else, and it won't be enough, and you might not get an admission for the master program. So try again to have a balanced approach, I would say. Of course, you have to prepare well, and you have to invest time and energy in the test, and it's a preparation. It takes several months. It's not something that you can wing, if I can say. You don't just wing it, but you have to really work hard for it. But look at also all the other great elements that you have in your background also. So that would be my advice. Maybe it's a question also, Akshata, we can answer together about a person with a technical background and how they can best present themselves in their application. Maybe you can tell us about your own background and how did you approach preparing for ESCP?
So for me, I had a business education background. I did my bachelor's in management studies. And then I interned also in a management side. But I know people who applied with a technical background who were engineers. And it's just about in the interview conveying why you really want to learn management. And if you are able to do that clearly, that's what the interviewers or the panelists are looking for. So your motivation to study management, and especially at ESC.
Thank you. And actually, I can answer. I think as I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, we're accepting students coming from any field. So we don't have a quota and we don't have a certain amount of engineers or a certain amount of students with a business degree. We want as much diversity in the classroom as possible. So we're really interested in any type of educational field that you might have chosen. But of course, we need to understand the consistency of then applying and moving on to a master in management. We need to understand how that's a good fit for you. If you have a technical background, it's actually sometimes quite logic to go into a business school and get a business degree, management degree, because you might see yourself in the future in a position where you're managing teams and projects, and you might need also the business angle, and you feel like this is something you need to strengthen. So you don't need any previous business knowledge. I think actually people that have a technical background, usually they're faring quite well on the tests. Maria, I don't know if you have some figures in mind, but I think you may agree that usually students that are very good with quantitative topics, if you have done a degree in engineering field prior, usually it's a section that you have no problem with. So I would say it's more for students maybe who have liberal arts or literature, that have not done math in a long time. Maybe for them it will be a bit more work. So yeah. Sorry, Maria, you wanted to say something?
No problem. Absolutely. The GRE, for example, is used from students from all kinds of disciplines. So even if you don't have even if you don't come from business education background, let's say you come from technical background or the arts or humanity or anything else, the GRE is used by all kinds of students. Of course, engineer, because of their background, they do a little bit better on the quantitative part. But with some practice, you can definitely reach a high score as well.
And there is one question, actually, a student is asking very specifically, coming from Mauritius, is it possible to apply to the GRE from Mauritius? So I think you answered that earlier, Maria, but maybe we can reassure the candidate that it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. There are test centers in Mauritius, and also the at-home option of the test is available. So if that suits you better, you can of course look into it. The last link that we posted with the test centers, have a look on there. If you don't find it, or if you have any specific questions, please get in touch with me. I'll be more than happy to assist.
Another question for you. Thank you, Maria. A student is asking, Juliana, can someone take a test more than once?
Yes, absolutely. You can take the GRE more than one time. We understand that a lot of things are into play. Maybe you're nervous, maybe you're not feeling well, maybe just different things outside of your skills can affect your performance. So if you're not happy with your result on the GRE, you can retake it in 21 days. And you can retake it maximum 5 times per year. Also, one thing to mention is that about 10 to 15 days after your exam, In your ETS account where you register for the GRE, there is a diagnostic tool which is going to show you which answers you got right, which answers you got wrong, which questions you did better at. So it can just kind of help guide you and direct you of where you need some more preparation for your next take.
Thank you so much. And along the same line, there is a question about the preparation. How long can they expect to prepare the GRE? So I think maybe both Maria and Akshata, you can have a interesting perspective on the question.
Okay, let me start. It just really depends, I think, on your skills at the moment and your current preparation levels. It's a good idea to go through a GRE practice exam and just to check how you're doing. As I said earlier, maybe, maybe some sections are really a walk in the park and some other sections take a little bit more time. I think generally on average, the preparation is anything between a month to 3 months, just depending on your level and how used you are, and also how much time you can actually dedicate to it. If you have full time to dedicate to the exam, maybe in a week you're ready. If you have just a couple of hours a week, you will take longer. It's very personal, so go through some of the preparation materials and just see where you stand.
So for me personally, I took around 3 months, but for me the preparation was more of a continuous process. As Maria said, I gave the test prep tool. I used that, and I understood that I needed more work on my verbal reasoning section. So over the period of 3 months, I tried to increase my vocabulary skills and everything that is required. And then I again gave a practice test, understood that I have, improved in that area, and then I shifted to quantitative reasoning work, like practicing. So it totally depends. If you're good in one section and lacking somewhere, so you just need to rectify and improve one of those and then give the practice test again. So around 3 months, I think, is a good time. For me, I took at least 3 months.
And can you say how many hours per day you were working on it, or what was your plan, or how did you organize yourself?
So I was preparing for the test while I was working. So for me, I gave at least 2 hours a day. That was my limit per day. And on the weekends, I used to work more. But for me, as I said earlier, it was more on about absorbing for me, the main problem that I had was while preparing was verbal reasoning. So it cannot be done in a week, because you can work on your quantitative reasoning in a week. That's if you're good at math, but verbal reasoning is a more continuous process. So 2 hours a day working on that, and then on the weekends working on quantitative reasoning. So it depends how well you are in each section, and you can like plan out your studies accordingly. But I worked around 2 hours a day.
Thank you so much. And actually, it's another question for you. A student from India is asking, why did you choose ESCP? And they would find it very helpful to get your perspective on that.
Okay, so for me, my first preference was always ESCP because one, the specializations that ESCP has, and also the campus. So personally, I have now studied in the Paris campus, Berlin campus, and the London campus. And also as I said earlier, the specializations really give you the freedom to understand and do what you want to do with your career. So plan accordingly. So for now, I have done my consulting specialization, and I'll be taking a gap next semester, which gives me a period to work or intern. And then again, I'll do another specialization, which I think the structure from last year has changed. Now people can do 3 specializations, but for us, it's 2 specializations. So it's basically the freedom to just organize your career according to what you are interested in, and plus the alumni network is huge. You have so many opportunities to talk to alumni, understand how the industry works, different industries work. Apart from that, the campuses that we have, each campus is wonderful. I've been to 3 campuses till now, and it has been a great experience as a student also.
Another question for you, Akshata. A student also from India is wondering about the moving across the different ESCP campuses and different countries. How has it been for you, and with the visa, etc.? How did you organize yourself?
So I started in Paris, so I had the French visa, and then I moved to Berlin. Uh, we so the school always guides you with what you have to do with the visa. As a non-EU student, the college is always there to help you at every campus. They'll always help you that you need to do this. They'll send you emails, or you can always contact them. Uh, it is a little difficult, but I think it's an experience in itself, because you are learning adapting to different situations, but it's totally manageable, and the school is always there to help you with any problems that you face in the visa. But I don't think I personally did not face any problems, but in the visa procedure, and the school was always there to help. So if you even go to different campuses, I mean, it's a great experience, and you shouldn't think about the visa as a barrier to moving campuses personally.
Thank you so much. There are a couple of questions for Maria, I think, on the GRE more specifically. One of them is, do they get unofficial scores, like a temporary score? And is it something that they can send to the school? And the second question is there a feature after taking the GRE that they can accept or reject the score? If you can elaborate a little bit on those two points.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you take your GRE test, at the end of the test, on the testing day, you have unofficial scores reported for 2 of the sections, for the verbal reasoning and for the quantitative reasoning. The reason you get these scores so quickly is because they're rated by a computer. The analytical writing section, which is your essays, your 2 essays, it's rated by a human rater and by a computer as well. So that takes a little longer. However, based on your verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning at the end of your test, you can select to send your scores to 4 schools already. So these 4 schools are included in your GRE fee. So there's no additional charge to that. And if you're happy with your score, you can just go ahead and send your scores. If you're unhappy with your scores and you really think, I didn't do my best performance today, I just had a bad day, you can cancel your scores on the spot. So those are the 2 options. If you don't cancel your scores, the official scores will come 10 to 15 days to your ETS account, including the analytical writing. So all 3 sections will come to your score. And if you, in the meantime, if you have started considering another program or another school, you can always send it additionally, but that is coming at a charge. I believe it's about $25. But you can send as many scores as you wish. Maybe you change your mind or anything happens. So those are the options around scoring, official, unofficial scores, etc.
Thank you so much. There is maybe one or two more questions, and then I think we can wrap the session. I see a lot of students have to leave the session, so I will try to answer a couple more questions. And of course, feel free to email us anytime with your specific queries. There is a question for Akshata about the total cost of the program. How much would you say you have to budget when you do the main program at ESCP?
So for the fees, you already have the information on the website. And apart from that, I think we have a section on the website which talks about the living expenses in each city. This will give you a clear idea of how much you will be spending in general in each city wherever we have our campuses. And then accordingly, you can just, plan out your budget, or that, that's it. I mean, the information is very accurate, at least for the campuses, because that's what I followed while I set a budget, and it's good. Like it's a good benchmark for you to just set a budget.
Thank you. And there is one question on the campus selection. How did you choose your campuses, and what were the factors in choosing the different locations that you chose?
So for me, I wanted to start in Paris because that was my personal like just I wanted to do one semester in Paris, and then since I had applied for the German degree, which we can do in Master in Management, so I did one semester in Berlin. And then for the specializations, you have different specializations on different campuses. So I wanted to do the business consulting specialization. Therefore, I came to London. So it depends which specialization you want to take. Accordingly, you can move.
Thank you so much. I think we covered pretty much everything. So I will have a look if we left some stones unturned, some questions unanswered. I will make sure to answer very quickly. I just wanted to ask Maria and Akshata if you have last few words to tell to our students today.
My very best advice from application and from test perspective, of course, is just start preparing as early as you can. It's not as scary. Just take the dive in. At least once you know where you stand, you know how much time you will need, and you can plan the rest of your documents and the rest of your timeline. And that's really the best advice. I wish each and every one of you all the best with your applications.
Okay, for me, I would just say that I know like the process seems very stressful at times because that's how I felt. But this is something that I tried. I set targets like timeline wise, which gave me a clear understanding of when I need to do what. So do that. And for the GRE prep, just play to your strengths and weakness. Like if you're good at something, and just enhance that more. And if you're not good at something, work on it. Keep working on it continuously. This will help you improve your score. For the application part, just be ready with all your documents, and then send the application in. And for the interview, uh, be prepared, do your research, and I don't think it's going to be a very stressful interview, but it would be a good experience, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you in ESCP. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So yes, I will say I will very much echo both Maria and Akshata. Best of luck with your application. Feel free to send me an email or call me. I mentioned both my mobile phone and landline. So if you have specific questions again on the program and the application processes, of course, feel free to email me and contact me. I wanted to say a very big thank you, of course, to both Maria and Akshata for being here today. It was very, very helpful to have your perspective on the GRE, both as a test taker, Akshata, and as a representative of the ETS company, Maria. So it was very, very helpful to have you. And thank you very much, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful end of the year, Christmas celebrations, even though the context right now is, of course, still a bit special every year and there. But hopefully you have some time also to think about your future and prepare your application. And we'll be back beginning of January to follow up on your application. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And bye-bye,
Thank you
everyone.
for having us. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.